welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our community. What did they do to get started, and what are they doing to stay there? And today, I have a very special guest. I'm getting to talk to Jimmy Richards. He's the Senior Manager of Global Talent Acquisition. Hey, Jimmy, I'm so excited to have you on the show, my friend.
Hey, Bruce, I'm glad to be here.
Man, we have known each other for a very long time, and I am so excited that you're on the show today. We are actually taping this end of July. This is going to be aired in August. And one of the things that right now in our time is there are people, one of the hot topics in HR is talent acquisition, right? It's finding people. It's the war on talent. So I'm so excited to have you on the show to talk to you about that. Hey, I want to start the show today, and I would love to learn like the Jimmy Richards story. Like, where did you grow up, and how in the world did you get into talent acquisition and leadership?
Yeah, I grew up in Florida, spent most of my childhood there in Florida, lived in Arizona, and actually was born in the Dominican Republic, which is a whole nother story. But I was, moved to Arizona as a baby. Then, we moved to Florida when I was young. I was about 7 years old. So really grew up there, started my, career in recruiting in Florida and started, more on the agency kind of headhunter side of it. And then I moved to Memphis, Tennessee, and continued to be, in that more headhunter side of recruiting, but then joined AutoZone. And that was my kind of first step into the corporate side of recruiting. And really when, going to AutoZone was the first time I really got into leadership and management, all the way up until, now I'm with Interstate Batteries and Senior Manager of Talent Acquisition. So yeah, it's been a journey. It's kind of half my career more on that agency headhunter side of recruiting. And now, kind of the second half and now probably more of, my career has now been on the corporate side. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey to say the least.
That's fantastic. I want to get into that. One of the things I would love to hear from you as we just kind of kick this off is that you had talked about agency. So for those who are listening that may not know what agency is, what is agency recruiting? And then number two, what is the difference that you've seen between agency recruiting and corporate recruiting?
Yeah, absolutely. So agency, it's staffing firm, recruiting agency, headhunters, you kind of hear a lot of different terms. So, and there's a wide variety of agencies. So you have, I started with Randstad, one of the largest, staffing firms in the world. And it was more office and clerical, you're placing contractors a lot of times. But agencies are kind of the third party that a company will reach out to. Maybe they don't have an internal recruiting team, a corporate recruiting team, or maybe there's a really tough to fill job that the internal team is struggling with. And so you would reach out to one of these agencies and partner with them to assist you in filling that role. And there's all kinds of different agencies. I did, as I mentioned, Randstad, which was, well, they do a lot of things too, but office and clerical was the branch that I worked in. Then I moved to more medical staffing. So they have, again, there's a wide variety of different ways that agencies partner. And so I worked for a medical agency called Professional Placement Resources there in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And that was placing travel nurses. So very interesting. There was, and I'm sure there still is, a nurse shortage. So it was a really interesting time to work there. And then the final company I went to, G2 Technology, was an IT kind of more of a headhunter, kind of specialized placement. And so, yeah, it really the agency can be doing a lot of different things and help with a lot of different type of recruiting. But that's the big difference. Then, corporate recruiting, your internal team. So like right now I manage a team of recruiters and a coordinator. And so we handle all the hiring for, the company. And so that's the main difference is one is internal working with the company, which is a corporate recruiting team. One is external and kind of partners with you in specialized areas of different jobs that need to be filled.
Yeah, no, that's I appreciate you sharing that. That's fantastic. Hey, I always like to ask, I mean, obviously you're in a leadership role today, but you didn't start out that way. So were there some people that have been on your journey that have helped you? I like to, call them mentors or just people that have like helped you get to where you are today. Anybody stand out?
Yeah, I mean, there've been quite a few people. I've had a lot of really, I would say, I think there's official mentors, and then there's people that just kind of helped you along in your journey. And so, yeah, I've had what I would call unofficial mentors, just people that maybe gave me good advice along the way. And yeah, I would say, one in particular, my current, boss right now, Christy Tinsley, VP of Talent Management, Interstate Batteries, really saw something in me when I joined Interstate, has really helped me along the way and kind of gotten me up to where I am now. Chris Willis was one for sure, used to be at Interstate. So yeah, I've definitely had some what I would call official and some unofficial mentors for sure.
Well, man, that's fantastic. I personally know Chris Willis,
Yeah.
fantastic mentor. I could see how he could definitely be at the top of this. Hey, I want to just touch on this just real quick. You mentioned Christy saw something in you. I'm writing a book right now, Life in the Leadership Lane. One of the chapters is about belief. And I'm just wondering, like, what do you think it was that she saw in you and how important is it for people to have that belief in others?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important, and I think part of it is if you just you can say good work ethic, but I think attention to detail. I mean, having belief, somebody, especially somebody that you look up to, or somebody that may be at a higher level than you, um, it's how you get where you are really, and the ways to do that, you have to make the person that was in the job before you have to do it better than them. I love sports analogies. So there's the war, they call it wins above the replacement. And it's basically, are you doing the job better than the person that did it before you?
Hmm.
And that's the same with, if you're interviewing for a job and you want to tell that story. Storytelling is always great, whether it's sales, whether it's interviewing. But how are you making the job, the company, how are you doing it better? And so, yeah, I think, it's that, but yeah, to answer your question specifically, it's very important to have somebody that kind of believes in you, will be your advocate, will be, have your back in certain situations because they know you've shown them, over time that they can do that. They can, have your back. So yeah, it makes a big difference, obviously, for your career. If you can have that kind of mentor partnership that, like I said, make the job better, make the company better.
I one of the things I love about Life in Leadership Lane is talking to leaders, and they all have just something that I have this takeaway. And I have never heard that analogy before. War wins above replacement.
Yeah.
Listen, folks, if you're listening right now, get out your pen, get out your notes. There's some nuggets here. That's fantastic. Where did you hear that?
So I mean, it's for multiple sports, but I think baseball is the one that probably uses it the most, and it means exactly what it sounds like. So if you are taken out of a pitcher, as an example, if the pitcher is taken out of the game and the person that would replace them, how many more wins or how many less wins, I guess is a better way to look at it. But the way the stat works, I don't know all the details of how they come up with the equation, but that's basically what it is wins above replacement. So if we lose you, if you're no longer our manager of talent acquisition, or you're no longer our manager of application development, whatever it might be, if you're a pitcher for the Atlanta Braves and you are no longer able to play, how much is that going to impact us? So yeah, it's one that I've always liked. I love, just sports analogies in general, but that's what it comes down to with, your job when you're interviewing is, are you better? Are you going to make things better than the person that was in there before you? So yeah.
Love it. Oh my gosh, that is fantastic. Hey, let's talk leadership. Here we are, 2021, second half of the year. I want to ask you, and I really want to get into recruiting. But first question I always like to ask my guests is, there's so many different ways of like defining leadership. How, if somebody said, "Hey, Jimmy, What is leadership to you? How would you define it?
Yeah. So I think, it's, you have to, one, when you're leading a team, I think, you have to take each individual separately. So you have to be consistent. So
Mm,
it doesn't mean, I manage completely different, but each person is different. And so I think, something I've always tried to do is be consistent in, kind of the, not ground rules, but just be consistent in what your expectations are.
mm,
But you may have an introvert, you may have an extrovert, you may have, all types of different personalities. So that's something I've tried to do in leadership is really, um, have consistency in what you do and how you lead and how you manage, but also understand that one person's personality is probably going to require a little bit different leadership than another. And I think in order to understand that, the key is listening. So, understanding, listening to the people you work with, whether they report to you directly or not. But yeah, I think, people always, it's probably been said before on your show because it's such an important point, but people are usually listening to respond and
mm.
instead of listening to understand. So I think understand your team, know what makes them go, know what bothers them, but be consistent. So don't try and change for them. Be consistent in what you expect, but also understand that you may have to lead somebody that's an introvert, or you may have to recognize an introvert a little bit different than you might an extrovert. There's all kinds of little caveats to it, but yeah, I think consistency, but also having flexibility to lead a little bit different depending on what your team looks like.
Yeah, I think that's so good. And, even in today, we have a lot of, the workplace is changing, right? We have a lot of remote work. So we're having to manage even more differently. But I love how you talked about, but being consistent in your approach. And so that's so good. Hey, I want to ask you, you've been recruiting for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I always like to talk about in leadership is building trust. And I would like to ask you this question, and I didn't I didn't give you this question ahead of time, so I hope this is okay. But uh, how do you build trust whenever you're talking to someone you've never even met them? Like, how do you build trust as a recruiter? And I'm really talking about early in the process because they don't really know you, you don't know them. How do you do that?
Yeah. So I think, authenticity is one way. I think you have to be authentic, you have to be transparent, um, be informed. So, understand what you're talking about. But yeah, I think it's if you don't know the answer, tell them that. But just be your authentic self. And yeah, I think, building trust, it's different, when you're building trust with a candidate you've never spoken to before. That's the first time. It's going to look a little bit different than with somebody maybe you've worked with for 5 years. But I really think authenticity, being specific, being transparent, all of those things are going to pay off. But when working with, let's say I'm talking to somebody for the very first time to discuss a position, I always like to, really first, make sure I'm using their time wisely. So covering, certain details that I know are probably going to be important to them. And I think people appreciate that. But then kind of like what we're doing here, just, okay, tell me your story. I want to learn about you. So it's not, okay, do you have this experience, this experience, this experience? That's all that matters. Checkbox, checkbox, move on. But understand them when you are, hiring into a company. And I think even when you're on the agency side, culture fit is so important. And we look for that. I think, that's a piece of advice as well, is really the soft skills are what individuals are going for, what they're looking for. If you are in the interview, if you've made it past a recruiter, or even if you're on that first step just with the recruiter, you probably have the experience that they're looking for. Usually by the time companies are interviewing, say 3 to 4 people, resumes are going to look very similar. So what they're doing is, in that interview, they're deciding, one, are you going to fit our culture? Do you have soft skills? Because I assume you're going to have the technical skills that are needed for this job if you're interviewing for it. But do you have the soft skills? Do you have empathy? Do you say me or we? These different ways that companies look for. We talk a lot about humble, hungry, and smart. We look for that
Mm.
at Interstate. But yeah, basically what's happening in an interview is they assume you have the skill set. They're deciding whether or not they like you and whether or not they want to work with you. And then they're looking for the data points to support that decision. So yeah, I think, that is hopefully answered the question, but I think being that, your kind of true self, working with the person and learning about them. It's not about me and what I need. It's about figuring out how am I going to help, in a recruiter's position, how am I going to help you and the company? It has to work for both.
Yeah, this is great. There's a lot of listeners that are recruiting. There's a lot of listeners that are leading. There's listeners out there that are looking for their next. And so some of these points that you're making, I'm very confident they're going to help them. One of the things I want to touch on, and this is probably, it relates to really all, but I was thinking about candidates. You post some things on social media. I really enjoy your posts because they're always very purposeful and very insightful. They make you stop and think. And I was thinking about a post, and I don't remember when it was, but you posted, it was Gino Ariama.
Yeah.
And he's the head coach of the women's University of Connecticut girls basketball team, very well-known, wins a lot of championships. And he posted that he puts a lot of emphasis. There was a video, I think. Yes. And it was a video about how he puts a lot of emphasis on body language and how he can't teach you about it. Talk a little bit about that and the importance of people that maybe not just interviewing for the job, but maybe someone interviewing as well. How important is that?
Yeah, I love that video. It was a press conference he did after a game. And yeah, he talked about body language. And when he is recruiting players, he looks for what is their body team, or are they sitting on the bench sulking, upset because they didn't score, as many points as they wanted to. And so, yeah, I love that. Kind of just goes back to what I was talking about, teamwork. Are you a team player? I think and the reason I posted it's so relevant to interviewing. And so body language specifically, I mean, that is from, now it's so different. We're in this, pandemic time where so much of it, the interviews are now on video, but you can still make a huge impact. Like, just because so many people may be wearing a t-shirt, on video, you're just treat the interview the same way. And so specific to body language, I think, how do you walk in? And this is, again, assuming that it's in person, but from handshake to how are you sitting, like literally to posture, every detail, matters. It just goes back to, what I was talking about. It's the soft skills. And this is just how you present yourself. So yeah, I love that video of Gino Oriema, talking about, we put a tremendous value on body language, and that if you don't have the right body language, you're not getting in the game. And it's so relevant, again, to interviewing, or just assume you have the job. How do you show up in meetings? Are you kind of walking in and kind of got your head down and kind of looking away from your manager when they're talking? Like, just so much of it can be relevant to interviewing after you have the job. Promotions, when you talked earlier about what do people look for? How did people, get you promoted? Like, all of that is relevant for sure.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I mentioned earlier about my book coming out, and the very first chapter is called "You're on the Air." And because you are, like, when you show up, it's lights, camera, action. Yeah. And how you present yourself. So you posted something, and I don't think I shared this with you, but I noticed that you posted something else about, and you're talking about soft skills, which I think is so important. And it said they transfer from one company to the next. You can teach someone how to use a new system, but it's hard to teach someone empathy that has never had it. And you had mentioned about, this is where a lot of candidates fail in the interview, not necessarily having the experience, but the right experience plus the soft skills. And you had several things. And I don't know if you want to touch on any of these, but I'm just going to read them off just real quick.
Yeah.
Passion, energy level, ability, influence, humility, vision, hungry, communication, team oriented, adaptable, empathy. And it says this is what leaders are looking for. Talk about that.
Yeah, it is. It's again, going back to the point where if you're in the interview room, you probably have the technical skills. It's, I tell people think about soft skills, but it is difficult to teach an adult. So I like soft skills are something you learn, you're taught even as, as you're growing up. Hopefully your parents teach you these things. Hopefully you pick them up from other leaders or mentors. But yeah, I can't stress it enough how important it is that this is what a lot of companies are looking for. I can teach somebody how to go in and, go into our ATS and go find people that have a certain skill set, call them, have a phone conversation, but I can't, it's a lot more difficult to teach somebody, like I said, empathy that's never really had it. So, I mean, I think, that was a call to all people, but maybe these people these college students coming right out of school, like just really focus on that, because it is, you want, as you're building your team, you want leaders that are going to be things we talked about, like Gino Oriema talked about, team players, people that are going to, I think, have the best interest of the company. I can't stress enough how important that is. But again, it's hard to teach that. It's hard to teach an adult certain soft skills. So just learn it early and do everything you can. I don't want people to go into an interview and figure out a way to fake these things. Obviously, it needs to be authentic, as we talked about before. But yeah, I mean, just passion for what you do. My mom always used to tell me when I was growing up, like, just find something you're passionate about. And I realized that, one of the first times I ever made an offer to somebody and it changed their life. Somebody had to pull over their car because, they were getting this offer that they said changed their life. That was, you talked earlier about when did you realize you found the leadership lane or passion. That was one of those times for me and I've had that many times, not always with quite that impact, but the ability to call people and change their lives with, just a phone call saying, hey, we'd like to make you an offer.
Yeah, no question. Oh my gosh. That is purpose, my friend. That is so fantastic. Hey, I want to, we talk about in the interview, I want to talk about getting in to the interview. I read a lot of things on social media. I talk to different people and we talk about how there's a war on talent. A lot of companies are looking, they can't find people, but yet there's a lot of people out there looking for jobs. And I think it could be a variety of different things, but I was wondering if you could share maybe some tips. I know, I see a lot of things on your profile about you're a very good interviewer. I have a couple of questions. Number one, how has recruiting changed, in the last, I don't know, 10 years or so? But number two, what are some tips that someone, maybe they're listening today or watching this interview, what are some tips they might think about? Because I'm thinking about a couple of things. Number one, I'm seeing where now you have videos that you can send out to people. You have social media opportunities to reach people. What are some tips and strategies you might give some candidates today that they might think ways to elevate their opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, recruiting has changed a lot in the 10 years. It's probably changed more in the last, 16 months. This is a job market like I've never seen. But I think so there's tips on how to get into the interview, and then there's tips on what to do in the interview. I think you mentioned social media. People are 10 years ago, yeah, LinkedIn was around. Was it like it is now? No, not at all. But so I think networking. You're one of the best networkers I know, Bruce. But I think if you find a job that you're interested in, let's say you apply on the company's website, immediately you should go to LinkedIn, look for the talent acquisition leader, look for a recruiter, look for the person you think might lead that function that you just applied to, and send them a very brief message. Like, you don't need to send them 5 paragraphs, but just go out there on LinkedIn, send them a message, say, hey, I just applied to, this job. I think I'd be a great fit. I'd love to learn more. Can I have a conversation with you, or can you point me to a person that might be better to talk to? I mean, something as simple as that, it makes a difference. What you don't want to do is just write that message, say, you know, I just applied to this position, and then just leave it at that. Like, have a quick story why you might be a good fit. Tell them you want to talk to them, and ask if not you, who else. That does not bother people. At least it shouldn't bother people. I'm never
Mhm.
bothered when I get a message like that. I appreciate that people are taking the step. So do things like that, or look at, if you find out you're connected to, maybe you go and look up that person, you find out that, Bruce is connected to the person you want to reach out to. Maybe send Bruce a note and say, hey, Bruce, can you help me? I'm trying to talk to, Jimmy at Interstate about this job that I just applied to. So network, that's a huge part. Once you do that, then, kind of segueing to, okay, how do I get the interview, or how do I perform in the interview? Again, going back to, the wins above the replacement, you want to tell a story, like storytelling. Sales, recruiting, it's storytelling. How are you going to make that company better? I like to use I learned this somewhere along the way. I wish I could remember where I learned it, because I'd like to give them credit. But there's the CAR method. It's challenge, action, result. You can kind of use that with a lot of interview questions if you think about it, or even as you build your resume. So many resumes are basically a job description, and I get it. That's just kind of what people are taught as they're, putting resumes together. Maybe you put your resume together 25 years ago. Resumes have changed. At least what recruiters are looking for has changed. It should be achievements. So you want to have a quick summary of the experience that you do, that just kind of explains that. And then bullet points: how to grow the company, how much did you grow sales in your specific area, whatever it is, numbers. I talked earlier, people are trying to decide if they want to work with you, if they like you, and then looking for the data points to support that. And so build that resume of achievements. How are you going to make it better? And then that CAR, challenge, action, result. Think about that as you're telling stories. But how did you make the company better? How did you make the job better? How did you make your boss's life better? Use those stories, tell those stories. And then there's also an added part to that CAR, challenge, action, result, that you could potentially use, which is CART, and it's challenge, action, result, and then a takeaway. So maybe the question was, what did you learn through a certain experience? So challenge, action, result, takeaway. And then tell them you want the job if you do. So many times I've, had hiring managers say, yeah, I'm not sure they're really interested. So if you're interested, tell them you want the job. I had a recruiter once that ended up, we worked together for 5 years. And in the interview, she told me she wanted the job. And she told me her main job that she wanted to do if she got the job was to make me look better. She said, I want to do whatever I can to make you look better. And that stuck with me. That's not, the reason, that I hired her, not the only reason, but it definitely stuck with me. That's what people are looking for. So yeah, I think those are some examples that might be helpful on how do you get into the interview, and then what are some steps to help you in the interview.
Jimmy, those are great, great examples. I was thinking about, connecting on social. You mentioned have a quick story. I love that. People remember stories. And then the networking piece is so important. Just continue to find people that might have a connection.
Yeah.
And the people, if they know you and they refer you, you're certainly going to have a better chance, because a lot of times you're not going to get referred if you're not someone that they feel like is going to be a quality person. I love that. And then, of course, I love your analogies on the car. That's so good, and that's going to be so helpful for people that are listening right now. I want to ask you a question. I often, I've actually had someone ask me this question recently, but I've seen other people post as well. And that is, when someone's putting together a resume, is there like a rule of thumb? It should be 1 page. It should be 2 pages. It should be 5 pages. Number one. And number two, is it okay to have their picture on it? Like, what is it? What's today? What do people expect today?
So there was always the suggestion, I guess, that resumes should be one page. I don't subscribe to that thinking. If okay, maybe you are coming right out of college. Yeah, you probably don't need more than one page. You don't have a whole lot of experience, so yeah, try to keep it to one page if you can. But no, to me, what's way more important than keeping it to one page is telling the story. We just talked about it. You need to showcase how you are a difference maker. And if that requires 2 pages, 3 pages, then do it. Um, Now, I would say there's some limitations, and you don't want to get to, I've seen 7, 8, 9 page resumes. There's no need for that. There's really nobody is going to have really the time to read all of that. What most recruiters are doing is they open up the resume and you get a few seconds of time. They are scanning it. I think this is what I do a lot of times, is quickly scanning to the most recent experience. So what are experience section? What are you doing? Does it fit what I'm looking for? Now, do you have, ways that you're a difference maker? So yeah, I don't think the page number matters as much, except I probably wouldn't suggest going above 3. But if more important than that is making sure you tell the story of why you should be hired. So if it needs to be 4, so be it. But just there should be some limits on that. As far as a picture, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It used to be the answer would be no. I don't know if it's LinkedIn and we're so kind of accustomed now to seeing somebody's profile and a picture. Some marketing jobs, the resume is going to look a lot different. There might be a lot more creative in the way it's set up. It might include pictures. So to have your picture on there, I would say I'm not going to think any less or negatively. And I think it's becoming more and more accepted, again, because of LinkedIn. So, kind of keeping it maybe to 2 to 3 pages, but most importantly, tell your story and why you need to be hired.
Yeah, those are some great tips. I appreciate you sharing that, Jimmy. And I will tell you that at the end of the day, you're in sales, right? You're trying to sell yourself. And I love how you talked about you only have a minimum amount of time. It's just like networking, right? It's your elevator pitch, and it's about, hey, here's the experience I have, and here's how I think I can help. And the building trust piece is important, but it's got to be a process, not. I remember years ago when I very first got into sales, I got an opportunity. I don't think I've ever shared this. I got an opportunity to meet with a big company. I was so excited. I got to that company and I had all my notes. I was prepared, but I spent 15, 20 minutes talking about personal building trust, family issues. And I didn't qualify it, of course. And at the end of 20 minutes, the lady was so nice. She said, well, our 20 minutes is up. I've got another meeting, and I didn't even start. So I learned a big lesson there. And that was, building trust along the way. But first you got to come in with, hey, here's our experience. Here's how we can help. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, it's such a great point, Bruce. I can't tell you how many times I have been, interviewing somebody, and you kind of start out with tell me a little bit about yourself, and like that, 20 minutes go by, and the interview's over, and I get feedback from managers that that are hiring say the same thing. It's like, I asked them, how was the interview? Well, it was fine. I got to ask one question and that was it. So yeah, you gotta keep that in mind. I think people they think, okay, I only have so much time, I need to get everything out. But no, like, even if you are, sometimes the question you get may require a long answer. Pause, check for clarification, say, does this make sense? Do I need to expand on that? Like, you should never talk in an interview for probably more than like 3 or 4 minutes without pausing and checking to make sure you haven't lost your audience. So yeah, that's a good story, though. I guess it's not great at the time.
No, it's great today.
Right. Yeah.
It wasn't great at the time, man. I'll tell you, that was something. Hey, I want to ask you one last question. Of course, I help companies relocate talent. I've always talked to people, recruiters, and we've talked about how relocation is part of the onboarding process. Once they say yes, that continues. Do you think companies today And I just was thinking about this. Do you think companies today are providing more benefits, such as relocation, to try to bring these candidates on board? Because, like I said, there's a war on talent. Are you and your team, or are you seeing from other colleagues more strategy around, hey, we got to think outside the box and figure out some different ways of getting these people aboard?
Yeah, it is. I mentioned earlier, craziest job market I've ever seen, and I've been in a job market type of role for 17 going on 18 years now. Yeah, I mean, you're seeing companies offer iPhones, and I can't remember if it's for an interview. I think it's for the person accepted the job and stayed there for 6 months, something like that. I think it was McDonald's. You're seeing sign-on bonuses way more and for way more positions than you ever used to see. Yeah, I think companies are having to get really creative for sure. We're seeing candidates that will if you get to a final or you get to the point where you think you may want to offer them a job, so many of those candidates already have either two offers in hand or they're expecting two offers. So yeah, companies are having to get very creative. You're seeing that I think out in the restaurant industry, so many of these fast food places are giving sign-on bonuses. They're doing different things like paying $50 for people to come interview. It looks like that's improving a little bit, hopefully as the market corrects itself. And I think there'll probably be some companies that are going to overdo it on that front, and maybe they mess up internal equity or things like that. But yeah, to answer your question, it's pretty insane right now, the job market and kind of what companies are having to do to get that, like you said, war on talent. It's pretty incredible.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I know a lot of things you shared today are going to help our listeners. Hey, I want to just real quick, I want to shift to, you talk about leading your team, but I want to talk about leading you. And I always like to pull out of my guests. Is there a leadership practice that you have every day that you like a daily discipline that you do every day to help you stay on track?
Yeah, so I don't know if I can point to one specific thing. I think for me, a routine, kind of having the same routine every day is really helpful for me. It's funny because it's really changed. Started working from home, so I used to go into the office really early. So I've kind of changed my routine, but for me, it's just having that set routine where whether it's working out, making sure I have time to work out, making sure I have time with my family, really working my schedule around. So I think for me, it's really having a similar routine every day that allows me to kind of show up as my best self.
Yeah, I like that. Routine is so key to keep you on track. Hey, I want to ask you before we shift into It's Time to Accelerate. I want to ask. I always like to ask. I mean, you've given some incredible advice, especially around recruiting. You ever received any advice from I don't know, a family member, maybe a colleague? It was just so good. You just find yourself sharing with others.
Yeah. So when I was at AutoZone, I went. I'd been kind of trying to figure out. I was in recruiting, and I was trying to figure out like what am I going to do with my career? I was doing well there as a recruiter, but I was kind of thinking, what am I going to do 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And so Tim Briggs, senior vice president of HR, he's retired now, but I asked him, and I don't remember if it was an email or if I asked his executive assistant or if I just went up to him and asked him. I really can't remember, but I asked him to go to lunch because I just wanted to talk about my career. And great guy, said yes. I think we went like within, it wasn't like we went 2 months later. It was literally within a few days we went to lunch. And here goes with sports analogy again, which he was the one who used it. It was such a great piece of advice, such a great analogy as well. But he said, Jimmy, right now you are what I would call a home run hitter. You are, if we have a really hard to fill job, we can give that to you. We know you're going to go get it. But if you want to become a director, if you want to become a manager, if you want to become a VP, if you want to move up in HR, you need to learn how to bunt. You need to learn how to play the field. You need to learn how to do all these other aspects that are important to move up in HR or just move up, in any industry or career path. And so that really kind of stuck with me because I was, I had in my mind, I'm great, I'm doing such a good job. And it was, it was great advice. It also just let me know, like, he says, "Oh, you're a home run hitter." And I'm thinking, yeah, that's great. That's great. And he said, "But you can't do all these things." Um, and so but it was such good advice because what I did with that, like literally within, a couple months was I became an HR generalist. And then I became, an HR manager. That's how I ended up in Dallas, Fort Worth was, I moved and became an HR manager for one of AutoZone's distribution centers, and which, led me now to Interstate. And so, yeah, I think, his advice was you need to be flexible. And I've had to do that a few times when I, make jumps. Maybe it's being flexible in compensation. I definitely have done that a couple of times. The path is not always one that's going to go up. Sometimes you're going to have to go sideways. Sometimes you might have to go down, whether it be in compensation, responsibility, whatever it might be. Just be open to it. Sometimes like I don't know that with now, 2 kids that I could make some of those decisions I made back then, but just be open, know what makes sense for you, be flexible, have a plan, but be flexible to take some detours.
Man, I love that. I appreciate you sharing that. That is so good. It reminds me of in John Maxwell's book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the law of sacrifice says sometimes you have to give up to go up.
Absolutely.
And that is just fantastic. Oh man, I could talk to you all day about recruiting, talent acquisition, leadership. Hey, I want to shift to our last part of the segment. It's called "It's Time to Accelerate." Just some fun facts. I always like to ask my guests a few questions. And first question I always like to ask is, would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast?
Oh man, that is tough. That is really tough question. I love both. I would have probably, again, I'd say my routine has changed with the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, I would have absolutely said podcast.
Mm.
I have read probably more books during this, pandemic than I probably read the 5 years previous. So you stumped me for sure here. Um, it really, I guess I'm gonna dodge it a little bit. It really depends. So like when I'm driving or walking, I walk my dog. Part of my routine I mentioned walking my dog. That's podcasts, and I have certain podcasts I listen to all the time. I love listening to yours, and so it just depends. So I'm dodging the question a little bit. I love both. If I have to answer, I would probably go with podcast.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I appreciate that. I think you're right though. Pre-pandemic, I was the same way, and then pandemic, I didn't drive as much, and so no, that's great. Hey, we talked about all the things that have gone on. I always like to ask, hey, what are you grateful for?
Well, one, my family, of course. My wife, my 2 kids, absolutely grateful for that. But I'm working in recruiting and talent acquisition. You get a glimpse into the job market for one. And as we all know, this pandemic, it had a really negative impact on the job market. It's now flipped. It's a great job market. However, I'm grateful for a job. I'm grateful for, my family, grateful to be in a position where I know so many people aren't in a situation where they have comfort. I mean, comfort, so many people, there's so many things we talk about that we want. I think comfort is one of the more important things we want. And none of us have fully had it in so long. Every time we think, we're making a turn on the coronavirus and then, Delta and, all these different things.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I'm grateful for the comfort that I do have. I'm grateful for my family, grateful for my job, grateful to just be in a situation where life is okay. Even though there's a lot going on, life is good.
Yeah, that's so good. Hey, I've got 2 more questions I'm going to ask you. The first question I want to ask you is, like, other than recruiting people, what energizes you?
So, recruiting, talent acquisition, I'm so glad that the advice my mom told me many, many years ago when I was a kid, find your passion. So, I mean, yeah, you already said that one. So that definitely is, I mean, my kids energize me,
Mm.
my family, my wife. That's why I do what I do for them and for my family. Sports energize me. Can't wait for football season. Those two don't compare, family and football, of course. But yeah, I mean, recruiting, talent acquisition, my family, my kids. Yeah, those are things that certainly energize me. But football season gives me a little extra energy as well.
I love it. Me too. Me too. Okay. Here's my final question I want to ask. I mean, I've just absolutely enjoyed our time together. This was probably one of my favorite questions. And I want to ask you this, Jimmy. Jimmy, 10 years older, is knocking at your door right now, and you're going to go answer that door. What's he going to tell you?
He will tell me to slow down,
Mm.
enjoy the ride, a little bit. I have, a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. So that would mean, 19 and 16. So those are precious years. So yeah, I think just slow down and enjoy what you have in front of you, I think would be, probably the advice that my self 10 years from now would tell me. And it's something I try to do. I really do. I try to, like, I will literally in the moment sit there at certain events and or sometimes just sitting in the family room of the house and just really kind of soak it in, enjoy it. So yeah, I would say it's something my current and present self tries to tell me all the time. So I'm sure my self that's 10 years down the line would also be telling me that.
Thinking about that, he's also probably going to 10 years from now telling your 19 and 6-year-old, 16-year-old to slow down as
Yeah.
well. Slow down that car. I love it, man. Hey, I've enjoyed my time with you today. You're definitely driving in the leadership lane. Hey, if somebody wanted to connect with you, I know you're out there on social. How is the best way for them to connect or follow you?
Yeah, LinkedIn for sure. That is certainly the best way. So Jimmy Richards, you can find me on LinkedIn. Love to connect with people on LinkedIn. So yeah, please come find me, follow me, send me an invite, and I look forward to it.
I'll definitely put the link in the show. I really appreciate you coming on, just sharing your wisdom and perspective, especially around recruiting. I think some of the things that you shared today are going to help some people. I mean, I know they're going to help some people, not just looking for a job, but people that are also hiring as well. Maybe look at it from a different angle. So for that, I say thank you. And most importantly, I appreciate your friendship.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate you having me on here. I've enjoyed it. And yeah, appreciate your friendship as well.
Awesome, man. I cannot wait to share this. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye, Bruce.